the show had this weird quality where if someone engaged with the show, they then kind of just wanted to tell other folks about it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think that's the nature of the success of it. And hard thing to replicate. I don't know how you try and do that intentionally. You just hope you can make the best thing possible and people like it. And then here we are.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your setup. It's very fancy and colorful and very good.
Well, thank you so much. Listen, I loved this show so much. I went into it, I'm like not knowing exactly what we're going to get. You know what I mean? But I'd love to know like where the concept for it came from. Like how did you guys come up with this idea?
Well, originally a colleague of mine who I'd worked with on Who is America, a show with Sacha Baron Cohen, is a producer named Todd Shulman, and he had an idea along with David Bernard, another producer, of essentially what if Jim from The Office was a real guy and didn't realize that everyone around him was an actor, and you just had a sitcom with a real person in the middle of it. And that was the genesis of the idea. And they got together with Lee Eisenberg and Gene Stupnitsky, who are two of the writer-producers of The Office. And they had an idea for putting it in a jury environment. And then you kind of take it from there. And that was the basis of the idea. And then from that, they said, hey, to me, I was finishing Borat 2. They said, you're a weirdo who does lots of weird things with real people. Can you do this, please? We've got this idea and we've sold it to Freevee. And they said, good luck. And I said, okay. And then away we go. And here we are talking about it a couple of years later, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. One thing that makes me a little sad about it is like, how do you reenact this? Do you have thoughts on how you can pull it off again?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure you can ever do it in exactly quite the same way again. And nor I don't think would you want to. I think it's kind of like a great magic trick. And do you want to do exactly the same magic trick twice? I'm not sure the audience would respond to it in the same way quite as well. So can things be done? Yes. Do you want them to be done in exactly the same way? Probably not. But there's a world of possibilities out there. And listen, right now we haven't been talking about it, especially with the writers and the strike and the actors strike and respecting all of that. So right now we're just enjoying sort of basking in the glory of our little show that people ended up tuning into and really loving.
Yeah. What were the challenges in this? Because like, there were so many times I'm watching it, like he has to figure it out now. Like, look at this doesn't happen in real life. You know what I mean? Well,
that was our biggest, truly that the instinct that you just spoke about was the biggest hurdle for us. And it's that thing of, you're making a TV show, so it has to be entertaining to people and you want to have jokes in there and make people laugh. But if you are a real person on a sitcom set and someone was doing a zany bit to you, you might think they're having a psychotic break or need medication in some way. And so how do you balance those two things against each other? And we came up with an idea which is called the reality bank. And the reality bank meant you would fill up the reality meter with very boring things, like 5 hours of introducing exhibitions in the court. Like, here's a bit of evidence, here's a piece of paper, and then the judge looks at it and he takes 5 minutes and then he challenge it, and within 24 minutes you're just asleep. And so the idea is you do that as much as you humanly can. And then you would do a big bit like David Brown, Todd coming in with his chair pants, or Marsden taking a massive poop, or all those kind of things. And those, you're cashing out of the reality bank at that moment. So it's depositing in and then making your withdrawals. And the idea being you want to keep a kind of balance somewhere in a level where the person thinks, this is a strange experience, but nothing so strange that I can't believe the reality around me. And we kind of really depended on that.
Yeah. Well, and then also, like, speaking of like James Marsden, bringing in someone who is so famous, you know what I mean? Like the other actors, like that I recognize here and there from little things, but not really. And they look so different. But you've got James Marsden. Was that like, how did that work? You know what I mean? Without that instantly being like a tell.
Well, we're in LA. And that's very helpful because even famous people need to get summoned for jury duty. And I think even everyone in the writer's room had some experience of doing jury duty and being like, a celebrity came in and they were kind of cool and then they left. So we knew it was a real normal thing. There had always been the idea of having some sort of celebrity in the mix, just for a couple of reasons. One, it's more of a selling point for a show which no one has ever seen before, and it's a concept that people might not even believe can be done. So if you put a famous actor in there, it makes it a bit more maybe It makes it a bit more marketable, I guess, in one way. And also, if the whole thing with Ronald is he could take a left turn or he could take a right turn. We couldn't control all of his actions. All we could do was sort of build a very complicated sand pit around him with certain guide rails in it and hope that he'd go the right way. And what a celebrity does, and what James did brilliantly, was if you're facing a left or right decision, if someone who's famous or someone you respect says, I think we should go left, you as a normal person are more inclined to be like, you know what, left does sound good now that you say that. So it was another way of us sort of steering Ronald in certain directions. And it just so happened that James was unbelievably funny and completely brilliant and threw himself into it so entirely that it was magic the way it all came together.
Yeah, what was it like bringing him on? Like, because he's so perfect in this. He's so great.
He was filming a lot at that time. So for most of our cast, we had a couple of weeks with them in the courthouse. And they had just been like truly dropped into it as well. We gave them such little information. It's actually almost scandalous that they even agreed to do this thing in the first place. Because I was quite paranoid about information getting out. And, we had to create this entirely fake real world. So in good faith, they joined us and they'd been with us for about a week. But James, because of scheduling issues, he could only come in the second week. So during that first week of rehearsals, we have all this cast around and no James. And we'd say every day, don't worry, James is going to be here in a couple of days. I promise he's going to be here in a couple of days. To an extent that a rumor went around our cast that this was in fact the show, that we were filming the rehearsals and seeing if we could mess with actors and make them believe that another show is in fact about to happen. Obviously it wasn't the case. But then James comes in the second week and truly he was dropped into it. We had so little time to go through all the beats we needed to and to just get up to speed with everything. But he attacked it with such gusto and it was just a lot of fun. He really went for it. And I think you could feel two things. One was his excitement at being able to do this sort of improvised high wire act without a safety net that he had never done before. And two, the fact that he sort of had a slight tension and fear inside him that we were always doing the right thing and that Ronald would never be the butt of the joke and that ultimately his journey would be the one that's celebrated. And I think those two things really fueled an incredible energy and performance coming out of James. And that's what we ended up seeing on screen. And it's a marvel.
Yeah, Ronald is so great. Like I was crying at the end in the last episode, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love him so much. He's such a nice guy. Can you talk about finding him? Because he's perfect. Perfect.
He really is. So yeah, we sent out some great Craigslist adverts for folks to see if they'd be interested in participating in a trial in Southern California. They had to be jury eligible, so of a certain age, US citizens. And a very important detail is they couldn't have done jury duty before. And the reason being, anyone who's done jury duty before would turn up to our set. Our courthouse, it didn't look like a set. And within 5 minutes of proceedings going weirdly, it'd be like, this is not how this is done in any way, shape, or form. I mean, even the final verdict, which was unanimous 12 votes, that's not how it works. In a civil case, it's a simple majority. You don't need to get 12-0. But so it was very important that whoever did this thing had no idea how juries actually work. And anyway, from there, Ronald was one of the applicants. And Alexis Sampietro, one of our fantastic producers who is essentially tasked with finding real people for this kind of stuff, she got to know him. And it's an art. It's not a science. You just have to go on gut feelings sometimes. And I remember when we had our shortlist, Alexis put Ronald at number 1 and said, I just have a feeling about this guy. He's good. People will respond to him and they will root for him. And that was the most important thing in making the show, that our audience, like you, Tessa, would end up rooting for the guy and feel happy at the end of it when he comes through this experience.
Yeah, he was like so nice, like keeping secrets for everyone, like the whole time. And I'm like, I would have immediately been like, nope, that wasn't me, It
does show there's a value in just like keeping your counsel and being nice and being supportive and giving advice when it's asked for, and at the same time not actually messing with other people's business too much. There is a blueprint for quite good living here, which I think Ronald has shown us.
Absolutely. And then one thing I loved about this show was the final episode where you went back and showed, you know, kind of the behind the stuff, showing him where the cameras were and allowing the audience to be in on that instead of just like, oh, you did it, we're giving you money, the end. You know what I mean? Can you talk about like kind of the importance of including that? So we've kind of felt included in the whole thing.
It was always our design to have 7 narrative episodes and then an 8th episode, which would be here's how we did the magic trick. Because there was a show which I think was most similar to ours in the 2000s called The Joe Schmo Show, which is a similar-ish concept, but they all believe they're on a reality show. And we noticed when we were watching that they check in with their actors sort of behind the scenes very frequently. And Kristen Wiig is in it. It's an amazing cast. And you see her sort of 5 minutes into the first episode going, oh my God, I was so nervous when I met him for the first time. It was so crazy. I almost forgot my name or what have you. We didn't want to do that because we felt that we wanted to just do a magic trick, allow the audience to get invested in it, enjoy it, have the emotions come over them as they may. And at the end, if you're still interested, because we thought there might be some questions, we would peek behind the curtain and give you a taste of some of the stuff that we did. And it worked out it worked out really well. And I think I didn't think it would have, the 8th episode specifically, such an emotional resonance with people, because what you said, it has been said by many, many folks that they were crying during the 8th episode. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think that's because you see that the relationships that our jurors, our cast have formed with Ronald are real. And that, yes, there's obviously an element of deception to take him through this entirely fake journey, but the love they felt for him was completely truthful and what came from themselves and has carried on since the show has been out. And they're all still very close and a big part of each other's lives.
What was it like, just like taking in how everybody felt about this and how well received and how well loved this series was?
It's unlike anything else I've ever witnessed. And I'll be really honest. When it started, the week of release, there was not much going on. Our team at Freevee worked so hard to get this show into a position of success, and were really between their marketing, their publicity, they were really pushing it as hard as they could, but they had limited resources. And it's a very, there's loads of TV shows and movies come out every single day. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the problem we're having right now. And in our first week of really, just before we launched, there didn't feel like that many people were talking about it. There didn't feel like there was a groundswell of anticipation. And I do remember we had a cast and crew screening on the Wednesday before the show aired, and it was very much that feeling of everyone coming together and being like, you know what, we did something really, really hard, and everyone did it in the right way, and we all love each other as an experience, and aren't we proud of this thing we did? Yay. But that was kind of it, that maybe no one would ever watch the show. And then you fast forward essentially a week later after the first 4 episodes had dropped, and then the world just changed and people had seen it. And then it just, this steam and this momentum build up in such an insane way. And it feels like truly an old fashioned word of mouth story, but powered through 21st century technology, which is TikTok. God bless TikTok. I think exposed millions of people to it, which got them interested. And the show had this weird quality where if someone engaged with the show, they then kind of just wanted to tell other folks about it. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think that's the nature of the success of it. And hard thing to replicate. I don't know how you try and do that intentionally. You just hope you can make the best thing possible and people like it. And then here we are.
Yeah, I told so many people about it, like my mom and stuff, because she's not on TikTok, But like I was like, Mom, have you watched the show? She's like, no. I'm like, okay, you have to watch it. And then she'd call me up. Okay, I've watched, because I got screeners. So I was like, so I was ahead of the game. You know what I mean? And she's like, what do you mean there's only like 4 episodes? I'm like, just wait. I promise it'll get there. It'll be worth it. So, but it was so much fun. Like the show is just hilarious. There's so many lines that I repeat with my friends and
well, that experience of you talking to your mum, that really is, that anecdotally, that's a thing that I've heard from, at this point, hundreds of people where they say, I was in a grocery store checkout line in Scotland and the person bagging my groceries was talking about there's a guy and he doesn't realize he's in the middle of a trial, but he's a nice dude. And then James Marsden poops and that from so many corners of my life, I would hear all these anecdotes and these stories, and it really did feel like a thing that just caught fire with folks, and they just needed to tell people about.
Absolutely. And then before we wrap, last thing I want to say is, so how, like on set, right, when you're filming, how many things just like came up, or was it all pretty much like, this is where we're going to go type? Because you can't really like, it's improv, but it's, you know what I'm trying to say? Like with all the actors, how often did things like kind of change course, I guess, while filming?
Shockingly, it didn't diverge that much from the sort of script / outlines that we had just before we started shooting. A lot of the beats, especially a lot of the big beats you see in the show, from, you know, the auditions to the I'm not racist to the factory trip in Margaritaville and the arm wrestle, that was all written in advance. And it's a testament to our writers and to our actors and to all of our crew that we were able to guide Ronald's experience so that he would kind of unwittingly hit all of these marks. But yeah, there were a couple of occasions where we had to pivot because we had learned something which we hadn't thought about. So for example, Ronald has a very close relationship with Ken, who is played by Ron Song. And Ken was a bit of a gambler, had a bit of a problem, and loved this Korean game named Ute. And what Ronald had an incredible time playing it with Ken until Ken lost a great deal of money to Ronald, which was planned. What we didn't anticipate was that Ronald would feel so awful about winning a game that he didn't even understand how to play that he actually became slightly distressed about it. And Ron Song, who plays the character Ken, he would stick with it. He'd stick with the beats he had to hit, like a level of concern, but trying to brush it off. It's fine, don't worry about it. Whilst at the same time internally dying. And we had to pivot because there was a plan for Ken to flee the jury. In episode 106, when they're in the park and Ross's wife comes, and it's a bit of a down episode, Ken was also meant to disappear during those festivities and flee. And we realized that we couldn't really do that because it would upset Ronald. It would cut him up. And we didn't want to make him feel really bad about this experience, especially if he felt that he in any way contributed to Ken now being on the run from the law. So, yes, there were things that we had to change, but remarkably on the whole, we kind of stayed on course.
Awesome. Well, congratulations. I mean, the show is so great. I've watched it through a few times, and it's fun to go back after the end and like watch through again after that final episode where you've seen little things and stuff. So,
oh, thank you so much. And we love the clicks. So thank you. We appreciate that massively.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tess. Take care.
Bye-bye.